Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage.
He mentioned me 16 times today in a speech. I'm living rent-free inside his head.
Nigel Farage has reacted to the Prime Minister's warnings that reform's economic policies are fantasy and is trust-like while speaking in Las Vegas at a Bitcoin conference.
We have Keir Starmer, our socialist Prime Minister, is terrified. Do you know, he mentioned me 16 times today in a speech.
Andrew Neil isn't some anonymous Twitter troll throwing cheap insults. He's one of Britain's most respected political commentators. So when he accuses a sitting Prime Minister of leading a government built on lies, it isn't background noise, it's history in the making. Neil's words weren't vague or speculative. They were sharp, deliberate, and damning. He didn't just say Starmer lies, he declared that dishonesty is now the very foundation of how the Labour government functions. That's a direct charge of institutional corruption, one that shatters Starmer's carefully manufactured image of honesty and integrity. Let that sink in. In 55 years, Andrew Neil has never said this about any government. Not Thatcher's wartime cabinet, not Blair's spin-savvy machine, not even Johnson's chaotic circus. That alone shows how deep the rot runs. This isn't about a leader who bends the truth now and then. This is about a Prime Minister who treats truth as disposable, who seems convinced the public is too distracted or too naive to care. But just how far did Neil go in exposing Starmer? Let's find out.
Speech where he mentioned Nigel's name 16 times. Here's a taster of what he said.
Now in government, we're once again fighting the same fantasy. This time from Farage. The same bet in the same casino. That you can spend tens of billions of pounds on tax cuts without a proper way of paying for it. Using your family finances, your mortgages, your bills as the gap.
Labour UR's latest social media blast boasted that net migration had fallen by almost 50%, complete with a smug graphic stamped with official party branding. But here's the truth. That drop had nothing to do with Labour. It was the direct result of Conservative Home Secretary James Cleverly's rule changes, introduced long before Starmer's team even touched the file. Labour didn't drive the car, they just leapt in front of it to pose for the photo op. This isn't harmless political spin, it's outright identity theft. Imagine stealing another party's policy, rebranding it as your own, and parading it as a Labour victory. That's not just dishonest, it's an insult to every voter who actually follows the timeline of events. Starmer is betting the public won't notice, treating the electorate like goldfish with no memory. But Andrew Neil ripped the mask off, and the fallout is serious. If Labour is willing to lie so blatantly about something this easy to disprove, what else are they fabricating? Immigration isn't just a number on a spreadsheet, it's real families, real communities, real lives. To twist that into a shallow political stunt isn't leadership, it's calculated cynicism dressed up as strategy. And yet, this is the man who wants us to believe he's restoring honesty and trust in politics. The irony is staggering. Lying isn't new for Starmer or his party. Look closer and you'll see the pattern.
Opportunity. In the last two general elections, you asked people to elect Jeremy Corbyn as their Prime Minister. You said, I do think Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn, did you mean that?
I was certain that we would lose the 2019 election.
That wasn't my question.
I was certain that we would lose it. I did campaign for Labour. Of course I did. I will openly say I campaigned for Labour. I wanted good colleagues to be returned into the Labour Party.
When you said it.
And I wanted a party that was capable of being changed so we could face the future again.
Did you not mean it when you said it?
I was certain that we would lose. And I think many other people were certain that we would lose.
So you didn't mean it?
I was certain that we would lose.
So you said it because you didn't think he would be Prime Minister anyway?
Of course I campaigned for the Labour Party at the last election and the election before that, the one before that. I've always campaigned for the Labour Party, and I'm glad I did because I wanted good colleagues to be returned to have their seats so that we could fight for the future of...
So what you're saying is that for Starmer casually tossing out these kinds of claims of N when he knows they're not true is some
horrible level. He goes on to say, in this Starmer government, lying has not become a feature to which it increasingly resorts. It is the modus operandi of the government. He talks about the latest net migration figures showing a 50% reduction compared with 2023. The Home Office tweeted out a poster which said net migration has been cut by nearly 50%, describing it as the largest ever drop in net migration for any 12-month period. He says, Andrew Neil says, the implication was clear. the implication was it was thanks to Labour government policy, but it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. It was down
the
to
Tory
actually
policy.
James Cleverly. That's right, a Conservative policy because of his rule, the rules that he introduced. And of course, he is basically, and really this is worth reading because it is eviscerating, to put it mildly. He goes on to say the Prime Minister has a long track record of lying and gaslighting. I mean, good for Andrew Neil.
He's right to call out Sir Keir Starmer.
Chris Hope, Chris.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister Nigel Farage has 5 MPs. You've got 403. Are you panicking because Reform is so far ahead in the polls, it seems? Is he living rent-free in your brain? You went to a state school. Your dad worked in a factory. Your mum worked in the NHS. So why has a public school-educated former city trader got more in common with the Red Wall than you have?
Well, I've set out my divide. I think the single most important thing is to make sure we stabilise our economy.
So, casually tossing out misleading claims even when they're not true is apparently just fine for Starmer. In his world, accountability is optional and facts are nothing more than props in a performance.
I haven't spoken to Jeremy Corbyn for 2.5 years now. So
is he a friend? Was he a friend?
No, I mean, as I say, I haven't spoken to him for 2.5 years.
In 2020, he was a friend. So
he's a colleague, he's a friend, and he's led us through some really difficult times in the Labour Party. I asked for those that have been most hurt by what had happened in relation to anti-Semitism simply to give me the space to show what I could do. I didn't think I could ask them for their support. I said, give me the space to show that I mean what I say. I meant what I said. And that is why Jeremy Corbyn lost the whip when he responded as he did to the terrible report on anti-Semitism that we had, and why he now won't stand as a Labour candidate.
And he was never a friend.
No, not in the sense that we were, went to visit each other or anything like that. I worked with him as a colleague, but as I say, I haven't spoken to Jeremy now for 2.5 years.
This is Starmer's ultimate betrayal. The pledges he made under Jeremy Corbyn weren't just ordinary policies. They were pledges, a word that carries weight, implying principle, permanence, and honour. Yet, within a year, they were gone, scrapped, deleted, discarded like browser history after a scandal. What does that tell us? It tells us Starmer never intended to keep them. He rode in on Corbyn's movement, used grassroots supporters to secure power, and once the leadership was his, he sold them out like second-hand furniture. That wasn't a pivot, that was a fraudulent takeover. Starmer didn't win the Labour leadership, he hijacked it.
Country, and that is what we're doing, and we're seeing the early signs of that. Growth is up, the highest in the G7 this year. Interest rates have come down 4 times. So we're beginning to show what happens when you stabilise the economy. And I want to protect working people from Nigel Farage because I want to protect them from what he will do, which is exactly the same as Liz Truss, which will have a direct impact on their lives. And in relation to the second part of your question, I don't need lectures from Nigel Farage on what it means to be working people. I know what it means to work 10 hours a day in a factory 5 days a week. And I know that because that is what my dad did every single working day of his life. And that's what I grew up with. So I don't need lessons from Nigel Farage about the issues that matter most to working people in this country. Thank you, Chris.
Farage answering a question from us yesterday in Wigan. 16 times you mentioned Nigel Farage's name. Now I've watched...
Well, about 6 times in the answer to your question.
Well, right. I mean, it empowers him. David Cameron, as Tory leader, had 6 years as PM dealing with the problem that is Nigel Farage. And never said his name in public, or very rarely did. He didn't want to empower him. It's a bit like Voldemort in the Harry Potter films.
He who must not be named.
Yes, you don't name him. But 16 times, so it almost lifts Nigel Farage into an equal of the PM. The PM's got 403 MPs.
This isn't political evolution. It's betrayal by design. The very man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with left-wing, working-class voters turned his back on them the moment the cameras stopped rolling. And then, with a straight face, he acted as if nothing had changed. That's not progress. That's PR Sam. No wonder so many former Labour supporters don't just feel forgotten, they feel sold out. Starmer doesn't merely abandon principles, he monetizes them, he exploits them for power, and when they lose value, he discards them like outdated leaflets dumped in a policy landfill.
Yeah. I mean, also, so Rachel Reeves, by the way, she came in saying, if you remember, they basically said they would spend, they would raise taxes by 8.5 billion and managed to make it a whopping 76 billion more than that. They talk about 20 billion black hole that doesn't exist. No one can find this black hole, but it keeps being wheeled out. For a black hole that doesn't exist, it's had a lot of
denial. deflection, and rebrand Starmer's favorite tactics, especially on taxes. Just look at the national insurance debacle. Labour insists they're not raising taxes while quietly hinting at changes to national insurance. Let's be crystal clear. National insurance is a tax. Pretending otherwise is like saying a fine isn't a punishment, just a friendly civic reminder. It's linguistic fraud, plain and simple. And here's why it matters. Labour is preparing to unleash a tax bombshell while clinging to the illusion of fiscal responsibility. The truth is Starmer's team is financially cornered with £105 billion. A year in interest payments and spending promises stacking up. They can't fund their own wish list without hammering the middle class. That's not speculation. That's arithmetic. This isn't a rich versus poor argument. It's about draining the backbone of Britain's economy just to prop up a collapsing system. And when the tax hikes land, because they will, Labour will wrap them in comforting words like fairness and balance. But behind the curtain, it's all driven by reckless spending, mismanagement, and a refusal to face hard economic truths. Starmer wants credit for responsibility, but what he's really holding is a loaded financial weapon. And you're the one in the crosshairs.
Actually, for Andrew Neil to come out and say Keir Starmer is a liar, I think it's pretty profound.
I mean, he is. I mean, he's one of the great political minds, Andrew Neil. I've always been a fan for many, many decades, and it's worth reading that piece. And a lot of people, you and I can sit here and just go, oh, Starmer, you're a liar, and we can back up our arguments. What Neil has done in that piece is forensically taking apart so many things that Starmer and his chums have said. It is just brilliant. And they aren't.
Let's talk about Labour's so-called black hole. That phantom £20 billion budget gap they claim is so catastrophic that taxes simply must go up. But here's the problem. No credible economists can find it. Independent analysts, journalists, even budget watchdogs all agree this financial crisis doesn't exist, so where did it come from? Simple. Labour invented it. Not to solve a real problem, but to build a ready-made excuse. A narrative designed to justify U-turns and broken promises down the line. And it gets worse. While shouting about this mythical hole, Labour quietly inflated their tax target from £8.5 billion to a staggering £76 billion, all while pretending they're standing up for working-class families. That's not a mistake. That's manipulation. They know detailed budgets don't go viral, but scare tactics, those spread faster than any spreadsheet. Labour is selling panic too by permission for betrayal. Imagine someone yelling, "Your house is on fire," not because it is, but so they can sell you a fire extinguisher at triple the price. That's exactly what this black hole scam is. A con, and at the center of it stands Keir Starmer, hand on the hose, grinning while the real fire, public trust, burns in the background. And then came the reckoning. This wasn't just another policy stumble. This was an unmasking. The audience didn't see a bold leader guiding the nation. They saw a corporate performer fumbling his lines. It wasn't simply a failed defense, it was a moment of raw exposure. Starmer revealed what many suspected. No backbone, no core beliefs, no real identity. Just a man shaped by polling data, bending week by week to whatever sells. And now, people are speaking out loudly. But Starmer isn't listening. Worse, he waves it off, dismissing outrage as background noise. So what now? Is it time for him to finally show real leadership? Or has that moment already passed? Tell us what you think in the comments. Why is Starmer silent when Britain needs answers most? For more updates on the drama reshaping British politics, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay tuned.